I wanted to talk about my trips on the EUROSTAR when it first was launched, and I was standing at Waterloo Station in London by maybe November 1994 to see those two trains come in from France and park. And the EUROSTAR is or was a high-speed train running at 300 kilometers an hour, which took a tunnel underneath the ocean between Britain and France. And the tunnel was in the rock underneath the seabed, or it is in the rock underneath the seabed, still, maybe. And the British press killed it so bad that there were no passengers at all when it started service for months or years. And when I was the only person standing on the balcony at Waterloo Station watching those trains having parked, having arrived from France, and I was very aware of those high-speed trains in France because I'd been writing on the TGV in France for years, even though a lot of people in Great Britain seem not to have heard of it even now in 2020. The British press was doing a Neanderthal thing about the Eurostar. It's not safe, and it's a joke, and it's a French cock-up, and it's a white elephant, and it won't last, and it's a death trap, and they never stopped. And I went maybe a couple of days after it first arrived on Friday or Saturday morning into the ticket office, where there were dozens of people standing around in air steward kind of uniforms and lots of lines with tape and no people. And I walked all the way up to the counter as if I was a little prince, and I said, "I'd like to go to Paris now, please." And they said, "Now, sir?" And I said, having consulted the timetable, "Yes, is there a train now?" And they said, "Yes, there's a train in 40 minutes. I don't know if you have time to get it." Whereas, you could almost spit on the train from the ticket office at that time, as there was a barrier, but like the barrier to get in a metro or a subway, right? And that you put your ticket in. And they sold me this dirt cheap ticket, and I got in and their mouths were hanging open. And I went to get in this train to Paris, and there's no passport control, there's no security, there's no customs. Just get in the train. People were very unfamiliar with this kind of train in the UK. And there it went. It trundled along in an embarrassing way across all of the Victorian rail lines in the south of England. And then when it got in the tunnel, it sped up. And when it got to France, it went like hell. It went up to 300 kilometers an hour all the way to Paris. And then that was really embarrassing, the way it sometimes even derailed and frequently got stuck in the very, very old rail network in the south of England, which wasn't built for that kind of train. And there was a huge problem getting anybody to agree to update it, even though now, I don't know, 20 years later, more than 20 years, maybe 25 years now, it's been updated to make a high-speed rail line into London St Pancras. So the whole thing takes an hour and 45 and not 3.5 hours or 3 hours 45 or whatever it was. When you took it from Ashford in Kent in the south of England, it was anyway, you missed most of those old rail lines, and people were kind of proud of the old rail lines being the first. Well, when it's the first, it probably makes it the most historical, the most clapped out, and the most useless. So that was a very difficult discussion to have there in parochial island Britain. And you arrived, they didn't check your passport many times in the train. Sometimes I took 6 seats for myself. Sometimes I had the whole carriage for myself, but I had no reason to take more than 6 seats. And when you arrived in Paris, maybe your passport hadn't been checked. Maybe they checked it in the tunnel someplace. So in the tunnel, while the train's going through the tunnel, which smelled like clay and salty water, maybe you shouldn't go to the toilet while you were going through the tunnel because they're checking passports. And often you arrived in Paris and you can see the forecourt of the Paris North Station, Paris Gare du Nord, from the train. You can just walk straight out onto the platform as if it's a normal train. This is before the EU, before Schengen, before all of this endless wittering about freedom of movement and human rights. You could just ride a train from London to Paris. And now, of course, it's with barriers and terminals and check-ins and checked-in baggage and security points and customs and passport control that they initially put in London And then eventually they put one in Paris, which is like a very cramped mess. It was like a gas factory, as one says in French. And so that was the deal, long before travel became impossible internationally. And had you told anybody uh, at that time that international travel is now not really possible anymore, at the time, in the 1990s, we're still talking Concorde's still flying. We're still talking about what the next supersonic airliner is, and so on. And we feel the world's opening up. And now the world's locked down. Nobody would have believed you that that was going to happen due to a highly advertised pandemic or a pandemicized advertising campaign uh, globally. And at that time, I rode that Eurostar very, very frequently between those two cities, and I had goose flesh when it first came because I thought this now changes everything because the UK island nation is now physically connected to continental Europe for the first time. Thank you very much.